Jewish Channel's Week in Review. Which Jewish criminals will now be treated like Palestinian terrorists? Jewish pride after the Doma decision, addressing the problem of so-called chained wives, and more of the Jewish news that's changing your world right now in this episode of the Week in Review. Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. Criminals in Israel who engage in attacks on Israelis and Palestinians as part of a pro-settler right-wing agenda will now be dealt with on the same legal footing as Palestinian terrorists. Attacks from these Jewish groups, often called price tag attacks, have taken many forms in recent years, from young men throwing stones at Palestinians, to arson against Palestinian churches and mosques, to domestic vandalism against a memorial for assassinated Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and other patriotic sites in Israel. Such groups have even attacked Israeli military operations, including border control sites. Israeli Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon announced Monday that these attacks will now be considered as illegal organizing, a term that in the Israeli criminal justice system opens up the perpetrators to the same penalties as Palestinian or other terror groups. In a statement, Ya'alon was unequivocal, saying, quote, "Price tag perpetrators' conduct is identical to the conduct of modern terrorist groups, including ideological inspiration and covert action," adding, quote, "Its main objective is to prevent the legitimate Israeli government from carrying out actions, whether of state or regarding law enforcement, and to sow fear among the nation's leaders of making decisions of one kind or another." Also Monday, a 22-year-old man was arrested for the attack last September on the Latrun Monastery in the West Bank, which was vandalized with spray-painted messages including names of West Bank outposts and the declaration that, quote, "Jesus is a monkey." The incident was seen at the time as a response to the raising of the illegal outpost of Migron. Cracking down on this kind of activity will put the government of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in an interesting position. His own Likud Beitenu party has become much more heavily composed of those supportive of West Bank settlers and those on the far right of Israeli policy regarding the West Bank, groups that would presumably see support from their constituencies wane if extreme or criminal elements that nonetheless support their worldview are prosecuted in this manner. And Netanyahu this week faced another blow to his standing within that party, as the farther-right Likud member of Knesset Danny Danon was elected chairman of the party's Central Committee. Danon is probably best known by Americans as the Israeli member of Knesset who stood alongside Republican presidential primary candidate Rick Perry in 2012, as Perry boldly criticized President Barack Obama, as both Obama and Netanyahu were engaged in delicate international negotiations over the status of the Palestinians at the United Nations. Danon has said that the Likud party is opposed to a two-state solution, something that Netanyahu has said he is for, and that would be a necessary element of any peace deal with Palestine. Moving on to an internal religious conflict in the Jewish community, so-called chained women, those seeking an official Jewish divorce but stuck in their marriages because of their husband's recalcitrance, were the subject of a day-long conference featuring experts from around the globe. Rebecca Honig-Friedman reports on the plight of Agunot.
For decades, activists in the Orthodox Jewish community have been working to resolve the plight of agunot, literally chained wives whose husbands refuse to grant them a Jewish divorce. And now they've convened the Aguna Summit, bringing together rabbis, community leaders, and activists to finally find and implement systemic solutions for this problem. For most, there was a sense of frustration that the human face of the problem just isn't acknowledged. One influential declared that his rabbinic colleagues had their heads buried in books instead of seeing the human damage involved.
There are rabbanim who are so wedded to their sfarim that they don't see people and people's suffering.
That frustrated tone was prevalent at the Aguna Summit, which was co-sponsored by JOFA, the Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance, and the Tikva Center for Law and Jewish Civilization at the NYU School of Law, where the event was held. According to Orthodox interpretations of Jewish law, or halakha, when a couple wants to divorce, it is the husband who must grant his wife a get, the ritual divorce document, and he must do so of his own free will. If he chooses to withhold the get, his wife is unable to remarry in Jewish law. Should she go on to have a child with someone else, that child will be considered illegitimate by many Orthodox and unable to marry within that community. Men choose to withhold the get for various reasons, as Rabbi Jeremy Stern of the Organization for the Resolution of Agunot, or ORA, explained.
In many of our cases, the get is used as leverage for financial concessions from the wife in exchange for her get, for her freedom, or used as leverage for concessions with regards to custody and visitation, or it's just withheld out of spite. The important part is to equate get refusal to domestic abuse.
ORA is currently working to resolve an estimated 50 to 60 cases of women who have been chained to their marriages for years, and hundreds of women every year have a get withheld for many months in Israel alone. The solution that Stern's group recommends is already being utilized in some Jewish circles, a preemptive approach called the halachic prenuptial agreement, a legally binding civil contract signed before a wedding, which states that, should the couple choose to divorce, they agree to go to a particular rabbinic court and to abide by that court's judgment. But the halachic prenup, which uses the power of civil law to resolve Jewish divorce cases, is not a wholly satisfying solution for conference organizers like JOFA founder Blue Greenberg.
It's not mandatory. It doesn't cover all the marriages that exist without it. And it's not accepted by everyone.
Greenberg and her co-organizers are seeking to implement what they call systemic solutions from within halacha.
That means when a case comes up, the Bet Din that has the authority, when there's a case of abuse, that has to take the power away from the husband.
Some potential solutions involve finding more lenient rulings and interpretations within the Orthodox rabbinic tradition that circumvent the need for a get, including various forms of annulment.
There were always forward-looking rabbis who spoke out specifically about the possibility of nullifying marriages when the husband acts like he shouldn't act, like a true scoundrel.
Prominent attorney and Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz argued that rabbinic courts have not been more receptive to the solutions being pushed by those like Rabbi Riskin because the Aguna problem is seen as a women's issue.
Halakhic Judaism has always proved adaptive when men want to adapt it. Now, when you have disenfranchised elements within the community, women pushing hardest, Halakhic Judaism has been somewhat less responsive.
But Rabbi Joshua Yuter, who live tweeted the Aguna Summit, said adapting halacha, especially regarding Agunot cases, is more complex than some activists make it out to be.
The very real risk with any of the solutions to the Aguna problem is if one is rejected or someone relies on a solution that other communities reject, any children that come out of subsequent marriages will be mamzerim, will be unable to marry in the other communities, and then you would have a real ideological, biological schism within an already fractured Jewish community.
For more from the Aguna Summit, watch the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Rebecca. Happier marriage news came this week with the decision of the Supreme Court to strike down many provisions of the Defense of Marriage Act, giving full legal recognition to many same-sex couples for the first time in U.S. history. That made for a particularly festive Pride Parade, and Meredith Ganson met up with some Jewish groups marching before the crowd.
Last Wednesday, the Supreme Court handed down 2 historic decisions for marriage equality, striking down California's Proposition 8 and a key section of DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, which defines marriage as between a man and a woman. With a 5-4 vote, the rulings grant the same federal rights for legally married same-sex couples as for heterosexual couples. As Jonathan Lovitz, an activist for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered, or LGBT rights, awaited the news, he spoke with friends who stood protesting outside the Supreme Court alongside faith community leaders.
Every day by their side, there have been priests and rabbis and imams standing out there side by side with them.
It was a reminder that gay rights and religious identity need not be in conflict. A message that another activist was looking forward to promoting amid his preparations for New York City's annual Gay Pride Parade, which was on Sunday. Jason Littman is the founder of Hebrew, a party production and promotional organization focused on Jewish outreach in the gay community.
I find that there are many gay Jews here in New York that are very culturally Jewish and unaffiliated and don't necessarily want to walk into a Jewish space to affiliate with their gay identity.
Both the Jewish and LGBT communities are familiar with overcoming hatred and struggle, but neither has always tolerated the other. To synergize the two communities, Lovitz wants to see more gay Jews being out and proud in Jewish spaces.
When my 12-year-old niece, who's planning her bat mitzvah, speaks to me about how excited she is to have me and Uncle Zach, my partner, come, it's because she watched Glee. It's because she grew up in a generation that said, oh, they're just like us. I get it. I have examples in my life that I can reference.
I'm never changing who I am.
At least at Sunday's Pride Parade, thousands of very loud and proud LGBTs gathered, and Jewish and LGBT groups marched side by side. With the DOMA decision handed down from the Supreme Court just a few days ago, the atmosphere at the parade is especially festive, with Jewish and Israeli groups marching together from Midtown headed down toward the West Village. To see more from the Jewish participants of this year's Pride Fest, tune into the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Meredith. That's all for this week. From all of us here at the Jewish Channel, be well. The Jewish Channel is available on cable. Time Warner Cable Channel 528, IO Optimum Channel 505, RCN Channel 268, Bright House Channel 330, Verizon Fios Channel 900, Cox Cable Channel 1, Frontier Communications, and on Comcast in the on-demand menu under Premium Channels. For more information, visit tjctv.com.